the last time. This is the last time we are going to check things out in the raid for this patch, because in case you have missed it, in just a few days patch 10.0.7 is going to launch, and patch 10.0.7 is going to bring quite a lot of balance changes. Some specs are going to be severely nerfed, like Preservation Evoker, others are going to be buffed, like Restoration Shaman or Affliction and Demonology Warlock, and others are going to get reworked, like Retribution Paladin. So it's going to be a good thing to check out how things have been in the raid up to this point, the ranking of the specs, the meta of the specs right now, as we get into patch 10.0.7, so that in 1 week, in 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, we can go back and check how things have improved or changed for specs in the new patch. It might impact the choice, for example, of some of you to roll certain characters for the next season based on how strong they become after 10.0.7. So let's go and take a look at how things are so far in the raid after the last time we looked at this, which was exactly 2 weeks ago, exactly 14 days ago. This is the very standard, very default and not super impactful DPS on all bosses in the raid, talking about the balance tuning coming in the next patch. Of the top specs you see right here, none of them are getting nerfed. Arms Warrior and Fury Warrior are effectively getting no changes at all. Subtlety Rogue also is getting no changes whatsoever. Shadow Priest is also not getting changed because, as you know, they are getting reworked in 10.1, so no changes in 10.0.7. Also, no changes for Outlaw Rogue, a very small, minor change for Havoc Demon Hunter, and also buffs to Marksmanship Hunter as well as Frost Death Knight down the line. So, most of these specs showing up towards the top right now are actually not getting touched, or at the very least not getting even nerfed in the upcoming patch. Okay, fine, if the specs at the top are not getting nerfed, what about the specs down below? What about any of them getting buffed in return? Well, we do see, as we mentioned, we do know already that Demo Warlock as well as Affliction Warlock are both getting buffed. Their stocks are actually rising quite a bit right now. Even with the recent nerfs to Affliction that they received planned for 10.0.7, they were just a way to rein in the big buffs they are about to receive, which are still going to be netting out as a positive change in 10.0.7, so both of these specs are primed to be doing much better after the patch. Unfortunately, just like Outlaw and Subtlety are already at the top and are not getting changed in the next patch, Assassination Rogue is at the bottom and is also not getting changed in this patch. So nothing really should change in 10.0.7 for Assassination. Same goes for all of the mages. All of the mages have not been having too great of a time in this season, so basically in this expansion, and it's gonna continue in 10.0.7 because Mage is not getting affected by the balance tuning of 10.0.7. Much like the rework of Shadow Priest will come in 10.1, the mini rework of Balance Druid, currently towards the bottom, is also going to come in 10.1, so there is not going to be much of anything in patch 10.0.7 for balance. Lastly, the more interesting one, of course, talking about the changes, is the one to Red Paladin. The full rework of Red Paladin is actually coming in 10.0.7 instead of 10.1, so we will be able to see already how this is going to impact the spec without having to wait for the next season. So there are still a few changes happening, a few things we might be looking for as the patch hits. So how is Red Paladin going to be impacted by the changes? Demo Warlock, Affliction Warlock. You also have some small changes to Frost and Unholy Decay, as well as in particular both of the ranged Hunter specs. Those are the ones that might change the most based on the changes they will be receiving in the upcoming patch. But this is for the DPS. What about the tanks and the healers? Because we also have some changes for tanks and healers. For tanks, it is, I guess, as a good news, no changes for Prot Warrior. Prot Warrior is already doing fine and it's not getting nerfed in the upcoming patch, so good for you. No changes for Blood Decay, planned in this patch. No changes for Brewmaster Monk, planned in this patch. A very small change to Guardian Druid, which should not affect anything other than the niche Thorns of Iron build, and either way, even then, it will be a nerf. The one, of course, which receives more attention is going to be Protection Paladin, because part of the Red Paladin rework is also going to be changing a lot of the general Paladin talent tree. Some of the outstanding changes are, for example, putting Divine Toll into the general tree. So Paladin now has more free points in their spec tree because now they have Divine Toll in the general one. That's one of the positive changes for Paladin, which Prot and Holy will also be affected by, not just Ret. So when it comes to tanks, even with this patch incoming, nothing really should change too much, besides the perhaps even further gain of popularity of Protection Paladin, who is already, as we have been checking already in Mythic Plus, who is already rising through the ranks quite quickly. The last of our observations for the meta right now in the raid are the healers. So this is something we have seen for basically the entire season. Preservation and Restoration Druid are at the top, Discipline and Mistweaver are at the bottom, and then there is some mixed orgy in the middle. Restoration Shaman and the two Holy specs are, middle of the pack. What happens with the healers in this patch is that besides the top two, all the specs at the bottom below the top two receive some positive changes. The smallest one goes to Discipline because it's literally just this. And nothing else, but besides that, Holy Priest gets some buffs, in particular to their Lightwell cooldown. You then have Holy Paladin, which, as we mentioned, also gets part of their general tree changed by a lot. In this patch, you have Restoration Shaman, which gets significant changes, not just to their general tree, but also to their spec tree. It's the one that gets the most positive changes overall in this patch. Also, yet another round of positive changes for Mistweaver Monk. All of this is tied together by the severe nerfs happening to Preservation Evoker. So in 10.0.7 we will get to see quite a few of the lower healers getting buffed, from Resto Shaman to Holy Paladin to Mistweaver Monk, and the top healer getting nerfed by quite a lot, Preservation Evoker. So it's going to be very interesting to see how things are going to change, although of course by now bosses have been taking on a completely different shape than they had when you were progressing, but maybe they're going to be enough to start seeing some trends as we get towards 10.1 in the following weeks. All in all, with patch 10.0.7 coming in, as we are seeing, there is some room, perhaps not massive, but some room for, movements in the popularity, movements in the meta. These are going to be the more interesting features to keep an eye out on in this upcoming patch, as we get, of course, the other parts of the content of 10.0.7, the new zone, the new activities to have in there. When it comes to the balancing, when it comes to the situation, the meta with the specs in the raid, at the very least, for this video, that's what's gonna be worth checking out in the next few weeks, the next few resets of the raid in this first season of Dragonflight, as we get closer to season 2, as we start thinking about which spec should I play, which class, which role should I try to main in season 2, what is looking positive in season 2. Those are the type of things we can start looking at right now. Then of course, as we get closer to 10.1, you also have to match the situation of the spec currently with the balance tuning, the changes that will happen in 10.1, the power of the tier sets that will come out in 10.1, etc, etc, and try to make a guess, try to guess correctly which of the specs will be powerful in the next season, if you want yourself to be able to play and not be declined from a +18 because you're not playing a meta spec. So for today, this was the state of the specs in the raid so far, compared with the incoming changes to each of the specs in the balance tuning of patch 10.0.7. With this out of the way, it's time to leave each other on this Sunday. We are, of course, thanking, as usual, all of our Patreon supporters for the contribution and help to the growth of the channel. As usual, contributions can still happen for free, liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself are free and good enough ways to support. You can still support in other ways, like following me over on Twitter or following me over on my stream on Twitch. Those are also fine ways to show your support as well. With this out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon. And in the meantime, I do not recognize myself anymore. I woke up this morning at 10:30 a.m. Who even wakes up at 10 nowadays?